Opening keynote. I'd now like to turn to our next session. And as mentioned earlier, when many of you registered, the stats show us that only half of workplaces in attendance have support in place for neurodivergent employees. So this session is going to be really useful for many of you. I'm pleased to hand over to Kavita Chandradas, founder of Undivided, and Harnesh Kaur, SEA Health and Wellbeing Manager. Over to you.
Today in a very, very important discussion on neurodiversity and mental health at the workplace. Most of us may know neurodiversity mostly as autism, ADHD, maybe a little bit more than that. But we know now that it's so much more than that. The definition has been expanding over time as our understanding has been increasing as well. Today, it's really more an umbrella term for all of us whose brains work differently, we process information differently, we emote differently, we perceive things differently. I would say really it's more a social movement. It gives us a sense of community, reminding us that different isn't bad, different isn't damaged. But at the same time, the world really wasn't designed for people like us. So there is a need for more equity, more awareness around neurodiversity, especially at the workplace, at the corporate workplace. What people like us can contribute in terms of our talents, what we bring to the workplace as well. So that's why the conversation today is so important. My name is Kavita. I'm founder of Undivided. We're a DEI consulting practice that focuses purely on neurodiversity and mental health. The reason I do this is because I spent about 15 years in the corporate world in India, which did a lot of damage to my mental health, my physical health, primarily because I didn't understand what I needed. I wasn't getting the help I needed. And that's why, really, again, like I said, this conversation is really, really important. We'll talk more about that today. I also have an amazing guest with me today to talk about her experience of neurodiversity, very different from mine. Harnesh Kaur is Health and Wellbeing Manager for Mars, Southeast Asia. Harnesh, would you like to introduce yourself very briefly and tell us about your experience as well?
Yes, sure, Kavita. Firstly, it's really excited to be here and to hear you as well and share this platform with you to discuss, as you said, a very important topic. And it's also very close to my heart. So I am, as you have shared, the Southeast Asia region Health and Wellbeing Manager for Mars. I have been in the healthcare professional for about 15 over years. That sort of explains how old I am right now. But in addition to my professional career, I'm also a mom of two young children. So I have Jay, who is 8 years old this year, and Jesslyn, who is 6 years old. So if I'm not juggling work or my children or managing Jay's sensory regulatory regulation challenges, then I really enjoy a quiet time reading. So reading is something I really enjoy on the side. I enjoy sound healing. So I've got myself certified. So I'm also a certified sound healer and a behavior hypnotherapist as well. So the subconscious mind became an area of interest recently. So that's a little bit about myself and really looking forward to speaking more with you.
Lovely. Lots going on with you, Harnesh, and I'd love to dig deeper into that. All right, before we get into a few questions, folks, we have about 20-30 minutes for the session here today. So we're gonna talk to Harnesh a little bit. I'll be sharing a little bit more about my experiences as well. Please do keep sharing your questions in. Hopefully we'll have time for some questions from you at the end of the session as well. So to get us started, Harnesh, why don't you share more with us about your experience of neurodiversity? I understand that it comes really from your family and how that has kind of influenced how you've taken your work around neurodiversity into the workplace as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kavita. I must say it has been a very eye-opening, rewarding journey, while it was also a bit overwhelming for a new mom to sort of transition, through the different learnings. So my son, he was 1.5 years old when actually my sister who kind of pointed out that he could be flapping his hands and there could be something different about him. I had a 1-month-old at that time, but I couldn't really see Jay differently. I guess it's just, a mom accepting Jay the way he was. But it was really somebody else who sort of pointed it out. And I think that's the first point, right? Sometimes different people appreciate differences differently. And that sort of kickstarted a journey for me. And being a health professional, I think I just got into a solution mode, like, okay, what do I do? I needed to educate myself. And with my medical training, it wasn't something new to me. But being a mom of someone who I was still figuring out, whether he was on the spectrum or he had something else that I needed to find out about, it set me up on a journey to learn more, to get myself equipped with the right tools and resources. And this is a story about 5 years ago. And I must say, for a health professional like myself, it was a very difficult and frustrating journey because I didn't have a lot of people who were speaking about this, firstly. Secondly, I didn't know, I had, a very big network of medical professionals, but I think in this part of the world, this where we are based in this region, there are very few specialists, who sort of are experts in this field of developmental specialty. So getting an appointment, to get an understanding about, what this could be was a 2-3 years long. And in that process, it created a lot of emotions. And I bet a lot of parents who are probably in this journey would appreciate that as well, that you had to find a way. You somehow felt a bit hopeless because you were thinking like, I do not know what to do, what tools should I do. So I did everything under the sun. I went on to do my own applied behavior therapy training because that was known as a gold standard for children who was on a spectrum. I went on to speak to psychologists. I went to a behavior therapist. I've done everything that I could, having the medical knowledge. But it also keeps me interested to always find out what others have, because I had this professional background to help me with this resources. But what about those who don't? So I think that was really where this journey kickstarted. And to just summarize, I want to share a story and how that translates into workplace, because I think there's a lot that we need to double down on the knowledge and awareness bit before we can go on and help individuals and embrace differences. And this story is really from my 4-year-old daughter. So as I was dropping my son off for his early intervention program, she was a bit upset because she doesn't get to join those therapy sessions. And it was fun. There's a lot of playful activities that happens there. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a situation where I have to explain to my 4-year-old that her brother is different. So I brought her to a cafe and I sat her down and I said, Jesslyn, I just want to have a conversation with you that, Jay, he goes for this session because he's different. And I must say that was a biggest learning moment for me when she looked at me and she said, no, Mom, Jay's not different. He and I are the same. And I think that was a very humbling learning moment for a person like me to know and to recognize that she didn't see her brother any different. I mean, she does recognize that he has hand movements, he needs to regulate himself, he needs movement, but she didn't see him any different from herself. So I think that was a very big learning for me to say that as adults, sometimes we need to unlearn a few things.
Yes.
And recognize that being different, as you said, is not damage, it's just unique with your own strengths. So I'll pause there.
That's amazing. I think a lot of things that really struck me as you were talking about this, right? One is, of course, the fact that I think biases are really learned as we grow up. That's definitely
Absolutely.
in my work as in diversity, equity, inclusion. That's something that I come across very, very regularly. The second thing is, of course, what strikes me, and I keep saying how important this is in APAC specifically, that this conversation is very, very nascent compared to many other regions. And that's why conferences like this, conversations like this are so important, because while the neurodiversity conversation in any case is a very new one. It started probably late 1990s, and so it's still very new, but it's not picking up as fast as we would like it to across APAC,
Yeah.
because there's still so much stigma around mental
Mm-hmm.
health, around neurodiversity. People don't want others to know that their children have a certain condition, or even as they're being diagnosed themselves. Um, and I remember we were talking about this also in our preparatory conversation, right? It's so difficult now, even with children getting diagnosed, but as adults, a lot of us are now getting diagnosed as well,
Yes, yes,
right?
absolutely.
And if it's so difficult to find resources for children, and
Mm-hmm.
now I see that changing, right? I think you
Yes,
would also notice that from 5 years ago, when your son was just about getting diagnosed, to now, you're also probably seeing a lot of differences in terms of the amount of resources available.
and support. Yes,
It's changing a
absolutely.
lot, right? Which is
Yes.
good. It could be faster, but it's still moving in the right direction. But now what we're also seeing is that people are starting to get diagnosed later in life,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's something that happened to me as well, for example, right? And a
Mm.
lot of people will
Mm.
also relate to that, because historically these have all been seen as children's conditions, right?
You're
Autism,
right.
ADHD, and very much also young boys' conditions.
Yes.
So I think a lot of things to think about, and a lot of things that are kind of bubbling up to me also as you speak about this. But I'd love to know now, with all of
Yes.
this context about how you've been experiencing it. It's obvious that it was really tough for you with two kids at home, lots of things going on. You've put a lot of effort into educating yourself as well. I'm sure it really helped at your workplace that you were able
Yes.
to bring all of this knowledge to your employees as well. So I'd love
Yes.
to hear more about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, so I think it just became a big passion project.
Mhm.
And I think I have one of the best roles. And I must say that being a health and well-being manager, it gives me a really great platform to educate. I have a great influence with the associates, as we call in Mars, and also the line managers. So I do a lot of line manager training, upskilling, whether it's a new line manager, it's a middle management, or the senior leadership. So I have a really good influence circle, and I felt that I had, a very important role, because I did have a dilemma being a mom, whether I should, resign and really look after my son. But I realized that that was the upstream. And I still, till date, have conversations with his class teachers, with his principal, and I educate them about how do we navigate, because they are also on a journey. And that's the upstream side. And there's also the downstream, which is really the workplace.
Right.
And in my work experience, I have been in multiple companies now, and there is a lot of conversation around mental health, and couple of conversations around neurodiversity as well. But you're right, in this part of the world, I think there is still a lot of stigma that we need to break down. And that brings
Yeah.
me to how knowledge is so important. And I think for us to sort of take the first step in a workplace, it is really about educating ourselves, just like how I did for myself and my son. It actually set me up for success when I want to come into a workplace and appreciate people and embrace the differences in how they sort of present themselves. And I also learned this drawing from my personal experience that my son perhaps may not necessarily enjoy having his voice out there all the time. So, how do we learn from these differences and
Yes.
appreciate that some people just need that quiet break? And how do we incorporate that in our ways of working in the workspace? In Mars, we do have quiet spaces where we appreciate that people probably need a bit of a sensory break as well. So, how can we, create these spaces in a workplace environment for individuals who need that quiet time? We also encourage in meetings